Good evening. Hello, everyone. Let's see. Just give me a minute while I fix my watch later list. My God, some of these have been here for months. God, how much is in here? Okay, let's start off with some fun. Let's listen to Marcus.
Thank you and goodbye. Time has come for us to go our separate ways, and I want you to know that it's not me, it's you. The
Huh. Oh, there we go.
Thank you and goodbye. Time has come for us to go our separate ways, and I want you to know that it's not me, it's you. The low-tax Channel Island, Jersey, announced this week that senior politicians on the island are considering leaving the UK and going fully independent. To this we say...
Goodbye. From my eye.
I have had it with bankers, multimillionaires and business people and the rest announcing their imminent departure from the UK every time they're held to account by those of us who pay our taxes and vote. They're like teenagers in a row with their parents. Fine, I'll just go then, and you'll never see me again, and I'll be homeless, and I'll be a prostitute, or even worse, I'll do hedge funds. Is that what you want? I'm leaving, and don't try and stop me. I'm going. As soon as Hollyoaks is finished. So for those threatening to leave when they're asked to pay their share of the cost of living here, go.
Just turn around now. You're not welcome anymore.
Yes, and once you've gone, we will survive very happily. In fact, I will happily drive any of you to the ferry terminal and push you off it. Here's a thought, just so we don't have to keep coming back to this tiresome discussion. It's a simple, honest, decent proposal. Ready? Drum roll, please. Everyone has to live where their money is. Ta-da! See? Easy. Now off you go.
Hit the road, Jack.
Don't you come back no more, no more.
Anyway, we're not going to need any extra money that could have been contributed by high earners and successful businesses because David Cameron has reminded us in very timely fashion who's really to blame for all our ills. Yes, it's the working classes. Scummy, scrounging little piggies, the lot of them. Too much attention on a budget with all the consistency of a toddler on speed. Oh, pasties, carrots caravans, petrol, look, a monkey, taxi, too late, it's moved, I need a lie down. I mean, I'm not so stupid or naive to believe that welfare is sacred and mustn't be touched.
All cuts at all times are wrong, no matter what, even if the spending doesn't help and we can't afford to keep it up. But say no to cuts. I try not to read too much in case it turns out I'm wrong.
Sadly, that's me when I was a student. Every protest, the promise of a free lift to London and a sandwich. Grow up. I mean, it might not be our fault, but we're in a pickle bigger than Eric Pickles. Inside the world's biggest pickle at the International Festival of Massive Pickles with a man playing a piccolo. But when I heard this inherited multi-millionaire Exetonian talking about a culture of entitlement, well, I'm sorry, but my irony meter went through the red and then exploded in a gale of bitter laughter. It actually... Yeah! I was furious because I've only just had a new irony meter installed after Rebecca Brooks complained about how she'd been unfairly reported by the British press. So, yeah. It went off with some force that morning. A massive dollop of irony landed right in my copy of The Sun on Sunday. I could barely use it for wiping. David Cameron mentioned those who work hard and do the right thing. You know, good people, the heart and soul of Great Britain. And he pitted those people against those on benefits, which, frankly, seems reasonable, doesn't it? Except that David Cameron knows that they are the same people. Only 1 in 8 people claiming housing benefit is out of work. The rest are low earners, doing what they can, but not earning enough to live near the shops and factories and schools and hospitals that they work in to keep the country going. And it's hardly Cameron's fault. Sitting behind the cabinet of new, shiny, compassionate Conservatives, each with a tired-looking Lib Dem on their lap being burped after another bottle feed of right-wing formula that they can't digest, are a great many slathering, vicious, bloodthirsty thugs who use the word tradition to justify ideologies the rest of the world grew out of decades ago. These people have no idea how the rest of the world lives. Yes, cuts to housing benefit will, of course, mean that a great many working-class families will have to use their second car to get to work, or take their children the 40 miles to school, unless they're at boarding school. That's what I went to. Never did me any harm, unless anyone says the word mummy. Then I wee myself and cry into an inky handkerchief until matron makes me num-nums. I only wish that low-income workers were able to hold the government to ransom by threatening to leave the country when they're challenged. Just to wake up one day to a country where the only people at work spend their days moving fictional sums of money from one screen to another in the hope that the sums get bigger and they get a bonus. And somewhere in the distance, as the streets lie unswept, unpoliced, shops shut, hospitals empty, schools boarded up, they hear...
Goodbye. From your eye.
Goodbye.
The Treasury Minister, John Glenn, said yesterday that you were considering overruling the independent pay review bodies if they recommend too high a pay settlement, even if that's lower than the actual inflation rate. Is that true? Is it part of your plan potentially not to accept the independent pay review body recommendations on pay?
Well, I just pick up where you started in that, talking about the strikes, which I have found extremely disappointing because I know
how that you find
them
disappointing,
the NHS
but just on the point about pay, though. Just on the point about pay.
I will come to that in give me 1 second.
Okay.
If the pay review bodies say more than 6% pay rises this year, will you agree to that?
So I'm not going to preempt the whole pay review body process. So what happens is the pay review body makes recommendations to government. Government considers those and then responds to those. We've received some of the pay review body sets of recommendations. There are others who've yet to report back to government. Government
and
generally
some
looks
of them
at
are
these
saying
things in the
6%
round.
plus, aren't they?
Okay, that was a bit old. That was the last Tory government. Okay, watch later. Bloody hell. Huh, well, we'll do a Sean one. Thank you, Marcus. That one was brilliant. Yeah, let's do Helena.
How's this for another privatisation success story? Private firms ran almost all care homes forced to shut for rule breaches in England. A study has found that more than 90% of facilities for children and 98% of those for adults that were closed down explicitly because of rule breaches, because again, there's nothing within the profit motive if you're providing a social service that means you should actually provide a good end-use product, that were closed down for these reasons. They will run for profit. Yeah, of course that's true. What's the incentive structure that would make a private company have to care about anything other than driving revenue for shareholders, driving value for owners, rather than, providing a good standard of care for children and adults? There's just no mechanism with which the private sector would do a good job at this, but let's continue. Let's read for a bit, shall we? Almost all the care homes shut down for endangering children or vulnerable adults were run to make a profit, according to a landmark study examining the long-term impact of outsourcing care to the private sector. Shock and awe. I cannot believe the private sector didn't care about whether or not they were endangering vulnerable people. Research published last week by Oxford University reveals that 98%, 804 out of 816 of the adult care homes closed by the Quality Care Commission in England to protect disabled, mentally ill and elderly people from harm between 2011 and 2023 were operated by private companies. Only 12 homes were run by either local authorities or charities. And again, it's just the legacy of the Conservative government from 2010 to 2023. The legacy, especially of the Cameron and Osborne administration, and their following of Thatcherism like it's scripture, rather than because they believed in it or because they wanted to change anything, just because that was the done thing and they followed it like a religion. And not only did their welfare reforms essentially deperson the disabled, we literally had UN advisors saying that we were violating the human rights of the disabled in things like welfare reform and the way in which we cared for them. Of course, rather than actually having a government department there to ensure that we were treating the disabled and the mentally ill and the vulnerable like the elderly were being treated well by our care sector, no, we just decided to sell it off to the private sector, again, completely without any kind of reason for doing so other than following Thatcherism like a religion. Because again, we don't want to have to care about disabled people. Surely there can be somebody in the private sector's problem for doing it for profit. And yeah, turns out that Conservative Party economic policy has led to the point where the disabled aren't just getting screwed over by the welfare system, they're also getting screwed over by our approach to the care sector as well. What a surprise. The Conservative Party treats the disabled like non-people. The researchers also found that just over 90% of children's homes closed by Ofsted in England from 2014 to 2023 were run to make a profit too. The watchdog only cancels the registration of providers if standards designed to protect children are being consistently flouted or if there is evidence children are being harmed.
This is why social care has it has to be socialised. It has to be run by the government or local councils. Having it in private hands is completely detrimental to the whole purpose of them existing, especially the childcare homes. Having a private business, a private company in charge of them won't work. They're too hell-bent on making a profit out of it, which doesn't work in these sorts of situations. It is completely daft, and they shouldn't be doing it. Nationalise it, for Christ's sake, Labour.
protecting children. How does the profit motive protect children from being harmed? It just doesn't. People are out here trying to think that, they're going to be having the freer the market, the freer the people. Or the private sector, they're more efficient. Yet the efficiency savings that you're going to get from the private sector, not that you necessarily get them once you've taken the profit into account anyway, because they're making a profit, but that's an efficiency saving that's being made there on actual service provision. There's a reason why we had to put laws in place to stop private capitalists putting children in factories, because it's good for profit. Welfare of children, that's of no relevance to the shareholders. And as we see here, right, they have no material incentive to look after kids. So as you've seen, the ones that do have an incentive, a democratic incentive, because they're publicly owned and publicly run and non-outsourced, they have a much better success rate than the private ones. And we see the results of all of this doctrinaire privatisation of the care sector under the Conservatives. It's led to children literally being harmed. Again, the bar is crazy high on this, but we consistently flouted the standards there to protect children. Anders Bach Mortensen, who led the research, said for-profit providers were severely overrepresented in forced closure statistics in both adult and children's social care. Past research and reporting have shown that for-profit provision is often rated worse than public and third sector provision, but it's been unclear how this actually translates into practice. By tracking forced closures over the past decade, we've demonstrated that the strongest regulatory measure available to CQC and Ofsted is far more likely to occur in for-profit provision. Again, there's a super easy way of dealing with this, and that's nationalising them. Yeah, and it probably would be cheaper because we wouldn't have to again pay for profits out of public money because of the subcontraction. Over the last 2 decades, care has been increasingly outsourced to the private sector, but the study still found a disproportionate number of businesses were stripped of their registration for serious breaches of standards. For-profit providers operated 82% of adult care homes and 79% of children's homes during the period examined by the study. Ben Goodare, co-author of the research, said involuntary closures were the most extreme examples of care failure. Forced closures are a last resort intervention with severe consequences for residents. These closures often involve instances of severe neglect or abuse. They also incur substantial financial costs for local authorities, which are responsible for relocating residents. Again, this is a problem not just with austerity, but with privatisation and with the use of subcontraction within the public sector, is that all of the cost-cutting measures that you get, again, all of those efficiency savings, the reduction in actual service provision that you get from the efficiency savings doesn't actually save anything in the long run, because you have to pay all of that money again after the fact to clean up the mess that's been made, either by the failure of service provision or because of the failure of the private sector. To quote the great Mariana Mazzucato from Question Time, sometimes inaction is greater than the cost of action. And here we see the same thing happening again, where we try and find efficiency savings by getting the private sector to do it in the interest of profit. And what they do is they cut protection for children because they make more money that way. As simple as that. The primary function of the government is to keep its citizens safe, is a quote from Thatcher. Funny how this only applies to bombing people and not to child protection. Again, this is the entirety of Conservative Party dogma. And it's coming back in the form of children being neglected by the care sector because the private sector doesn't have their interests at heart. Any other provider over the last 12 years. An adult safeguarding review in 2019 found that adults with learning disabilities, autism and mental health problems were subject to systemic neglect in homes run by the firm, which had pre-tax profits of £3 million before it was dissolved. A police investigation identified 2,600 instances of seclusion, with some residents wrongly confined up to 400 times. Vulnerable people were left without food, drink, heating or access to toilets. Like, this is like violations of basic human rights that's going on here. Like, systemic neglect is not strong enough words to describe how disgusting this treatment is. And again, people with learning disabilities, autism and mental health problems, people who are at the thin end of the wedge, who are on the sharp end of all of the problems that have been caused by the deterioration of the public realm during the neoliberal period of this country. And then they get shoved into the care of the private sector, and the private sector treats them like non-people because they don't want to treat them like people. They want to treat them like numbers on a graph on their balance sheets at the end of the financial year because their interest is profit, because that's how the private sector works. That's what their incentive structure is. The study, which analysed millions of data points recorded by regulators, also found that the care market had led to a concentration of old people's homes in affluent areas where firms are more likely to attract wealthy self-funded residents, and a concentrations of children homes in poorer areas where companies could source cheap properties and generate higher profits. Do I need to comment on how ridiculous this is? Again, this is what happens with markets. Provision goes where it's most profitable, not where it's most needed. The researchers note that these trends have left elderly people in
Absolutely ghoulish. Reducing people down to numbers or stats on a bloody graph. Absolutely disgusting.
deprived localities without enough care homes and have led to more vulnerable children being placed farther away from family and friends. The Labour government has promised to create a national care service, but the party is no longer committed to providing the majority of care through the public sector. Of course they're not. Of course they would U-turn on any public provision from this definitely not 100% neoliberal Labour government, which was a manifesto
definitely not
pledge in
neoliberal.
2019. Rachel Reeves cancelled a planned cap on social care costs in July as part of her effort to fill what she said was a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. Great.
Which she
Brilliant.
knew
Thanks,
about.
Rachel. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to that budget, aren't we? Well, what you could have won was National Care Service in 2019, but you had to have floppy hair Brexit man instead. A Department of Health spokesperson said it was tackling the significant challenges facing social care. As part of this, we're also committed to building a national care service, underpinned by national standards and delivered locally, to improve the consistency of care and ensure everyone can live an independent and dignified life. But you're going to have to get rid of the private sector first, which looks like that's unlikely to happen because, £22 billion gap in the nation's finances. Brilliant. Insane the hoops you have to jump through to build a council home or energy infrastructure. You can just do whatever you want if you're running care centres for profit, of course. Yeah, stories we've heard, genuinely harrowing stories from the private care sector there. Again, this is Thatcherism writ large. This is what they wanted, and this is what you wanted if you continue voted for neoliberal politics. But yeah, it's another privatisation success story. If you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.
Okay.
A crime was committed. A crime considered so serious that
Yaroun is a small but lively village filled.
On to Mehdi now. This is Mehdi Hassan, the Dahia Doctrine, Israel's illegal military plan for flattening Gaza.
With beautiful mosques and churches for the town's Greek Catholic and Shia Muslim population, and even a religious shrine that both groups cherish. The town is historically known for harvesting delicious olives, as well as wheat and tobacco. And it's also believed to be a biblical town, specifically the town of Yaron, which is mentioned in the book of Joshua. But today, Yaroun doesn't look like a small, quaint town anymore. No, instead, it looks like this. Yes, the small town in southern Lebanon has been completely flattened by Israeli airstrikes, which
Dear
the Israelis
God.
say are targeted at Hezbollah, but which these pictures show Yaroun, or even southern Lebanon for that matter, the region Israel constantly describes as a Hezbollah stronghold. This past weekend, Israel expanded their airstrike campaign into northern Lebanon, striking a Palestinian refugee camp.
Okay, Washington Post headline. Israel expands strikes into northern Lebanon as death toll rises. Mohammed El Shama, Suzanne Heidemus, Ellen Francis, Brian Petch, and Louisa Lovelock.
Near Tripoli in an attack they claim was made to kill another Hamas leader, but which also reportedly killed his wife and 2 daughters. Israel has also destroyed several residential buildings filled with people in the Dahia suburb of Beirut, including the 4 apartment buildings that were struck with 2,000-pound bombs, 3 of which were completely flattened during Israel's recent assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Now, Dahia, interestingly, is also the name given to Israel's military policy of disproportionately damaging an suburb that Israel attacked just recently.
Oh, Middle East Eye. Really good resource, by the way, people. Beirut's Dahia left deserted and destroyed after brutal Israeli bombardment. Yes.
But also that Israel flattened during their 2006 war with Hezbollah. See, the Dahia Doctrine calls for the Israeli military to intentionally, deliberately, cynically inflict long-lasting and disproportionate damage onto the enemy, no matter how bad the civilian consequences. AKA exactly what we're seeing in Lebanon now and in Gaza for the past year. This strategy was established with the rather delusional belief that disproportionate force will somehow deter terrorists from attacking Israel again, which, as we've seen from Israel's repeated use of the Dahia Doctrine in their 2008 war with Hamas, their 2012 war with Hamas, their 2014 war with Hamas, is far from the case. Former Israeli military commander Gadi Eisenkot is our military basis. He went on to say, this isn't a suggestion, this is an authorized plan. A plan that, by the way...
That was someone in Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet. Effectively a higher echelon officer who worked closely with the government, well, he's part of it, actively promoting and saying this, we're going to commit genocide. We're going to destroy these towns and villages, even though we don't show our proof that this stuff is happening. Just go in, disproportionately bomb, destroy, attack. Ghoulish, absolutely ghoulish.
Is a clear violation of it, as well as an excessive damage to civilian infrastructure. Nonetheless, Israel's military was just as shameless back then as they are now, applying the doctrine, the Dahia Doctrine, in 2008, 2009 in Gaza during Operation Car Sled, with a UN report later condemning Israel's Dahia Doctrine, calling their military strategy a, quote, a deliberately disproportionate attack designed to punish, humiliate, and terrorize a civilian population, radically diminish its local economic capacity, both to work and to provide for itself, and to force upon it an ever-increasing sense of dependency and vulnerability. That is how the UN described the Dahia Doctrine. And today, even with all the pressure from the ICJ and the ICC, the Israeli government is just as blunt about their illegal military strategy. Just take a look at what Israeli Education Minister Yoav Kish said a few weeks ago about Israel's military operation in Lebanon.
אין שום הבדל בין חיזבאללה ללבנון. לבנון תושמד, מאדמת לבנון תשלם מדינת לבנון.
Now, not only is that statement clearly genocidal in my view, but it's also just a different iteration of what Israeli leaders were also saying back during Israel's 2006 war with Lebanon in what were widely seen as declarations of the Dahia Doctrine. Israeli Major General Udi Adam, on the topic of military targets in Lebanon, in the ICC, the Israeli government is just as blunt about their illegal military strategy. Just take a look at what Israeli Education Minister Yoav Kish said a few weeks ago about Israel's military operation in Lebanon.
אין שום...
There is no difference between Hezbollah and Lebanon.
שום הבדל בין חיזבאללה ללבנון. לבנון תושמד...
The way things are progressing at the moment, Lebanon will be annihilated.
לאור כמו שהדברים לא תהיה אותה לבנון כמו שהם מכירים.
Damn.
לאור כמו שהדברים לא תהיה אותה לבנון.
It will not be the same Lebanon as they know it.
לבנון כמו שהם מכירים. אני לא הולך...
I am not going to deal with hunting down Hezbollah's rockets.
להתעסק בצייד קטיושות של חיזבאללה.
The price of aggression from Lebanon's territory will be paid by the state of Lebanon. Openly saying, we're going to destroy Lebanon, another country. Technically what they're doing is an act of war.
מחיר לתוקפנות מאדמת לבנון תשלם מדינת לבנון.
Now, not only is that statement clearly genocidal in my view, but it's also just a different iteration of what Israeli leaders were also saying back during Israel's 2006 war with Lebanon in what were widely seen as declarations of the Dahia Doctrine. Israeli Major General Udi Adam, on the topic of military targets in Lebanon, said in 2006, and I quote, once it is inside Lebanon, everything is legitimate. Not just southern Lebanon, not just the line of Hezbollah posts. During that same time, Israel's military chief of staff told Israel's Channel 10 television network that the country would, quote, turn Lebanon's clock back 20 years. Yes, even years after the doctrine's obvious failure to deter either Hezbollah or Hamas, or even make Israel safer, Israeli officials still continue to tout indiscriminate bombing and complete destruction as a reasonable military strategy. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is no better. Let's take a look at the message he put out on Tuesday to the people of Lebanon.
Don't let these terrorists destroy your future any more than they've already done. Stand up and take your country back. You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza.
Watch out! If you don't listen to us, we will attack you and make you suffer like the people of Gaza have suffered. We will dahir you, is what Netanyahu is openly and criminally saying. What does that look like so far? According to an Israeli official who spoke to CNN, in just 2 days in September, Israel carried out 3,000 strikes. To give you an idea of just how excessive and how disproportionate that is, during the US's 20-year war in Afghanistan, the country carried out less than 3,000 strikes per year, which still was far too many in my view. With over 2,000 Lebanese people already killed, a majority in these past few weeks, the current death toll is already surpassing the toll from Israel's 2006 war against Lebanon, a war that human rights groups agreed was a grave violation of international law, as Israel not only showed a, quote, reckless indifference to the fate of Lebanese civilians, to quote Human Rights Watch, but also deliberately tried to inflict a disproportionate and excessive amount of suffering and damage. Now, you might think that a country boasting not just about disproportionately attacking its neighbour in clear violation of the law, but also giving their illegal strategy a specific name.
Hi, Scribby. Sorry about that. I was stuffing my face with Doritos. Hello. Great to have you. I am watching a Mehdi Hassan video from his Zeteo channel on YouTube talking about the Dahiyya doctrine and how Israel are essentially committing war crimes against Lebanon. This is quite an eye-opener.
That might get some coverage in the US media. I mean, the Israelis are not hiding their Dahiyya doctrine. The Israeli media covers it. And yet there's barely any mention of it in our press. The last time the New York Times published an article referencing the Dahiyya doctrine was 10 years ago, during Israel's 2014 war with Gaza, with the article claiming that, quote, experts say the Dahiyya doctrine does not apply to Gaza. Ah, yes. Because apparently over 1,400 people killed during that war was not excessive at all. The LA Times published an article last November that briefly mentions the Dahiyya doctrine, that is, with zero mention of how it was obviously being applied in Gaza. The Associated Press has also failed to explain just how illegal this doctrine is, giving it a two-sentence mention in an article last month, and a one-sentence mention in October last year. In fact, the only major US media outlet to dedicate a full article to the topic since Israel began its war on Gaza has been the Washington Post, but that was nearly a year ago.
Okay, Washington Post, November 10th last year. The punishing military doctrine that Israel may be following in Gaza. We've got the proof, we've got the receipts. It's getting broadcast. It's getting reported on the internet by Electronic Intifada, Middle East Eye. Washington Post has actually been quite good. The rest of them, no. The broadcast media, absolutely woeful or downright genocidal.
Go. And of course, even when the Western media does give the Dahiyya doctrine a mention here or there, they still refuse to describe what's happening in Gaza and Lebanon for what it truly is. Because as one Lebanese political analyst put it this week, Israel has now turned what was once the Dahiyya doctrine into something even far worse. Quote, Israel's actions in Lebanon do not embody the Dahiyya doctrine, but rather the Gaza doctrine. The key distinction between the two doctrines lies in the Gaza doctrine's genocidal and ethnic cleansing aims, which are now beginning to manifest in Lebanon. Look, whether in Gaza or Lebanon, again and again, Israeli political and military officials clearly state their aims, their intention to wreck, destroy, and wipe out entire towns, cities, and even countries, while Western leaders and the Western media shamefully look away. Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.
Okay. Let's see. What have we got? We've got Turn Left from Friday. Wednesday? Wednesday. And we've got 2 GDF ones. How the CIA discovered Israel's nuclear weapons and how Israel spies on America. Ooh. Ooh. How Israel spies on America. I quite like this one. On you go, GDF.
Asked this week about another sprawling investigation and the detention of 60 Israelis since September 11th, the Bush administration treated the questions like hot potatoes.
I would just refer you to Department of Justice with it. I'm not familiar with the report.
I'm aware that some Israeli citizens have been detained. With respect to why they are being...
Oh, wow. Blast from the past. Hello, Colin Powell. God, I keep on forgetting he was the Secretary of State.
Being detained, and the other aspects of your question, whether it's because they're in intelligence services or what they were doing, I will defer to the Department of Justice and the FBI to answer that.
Beyond the 60 apprehended or detained and many deported since September 11th, another group of 140 Israeli individuals have been arrested and detained in this year in what government documents describe as, quote, an organized intelligence gathering operation designed to, quote, penetrate government facilities.
Okay, Carl Carlson, reporter for Fox News. Interesting.
Most of those individuals said they had served in the Israeli military, which is compulsory there, but they also had, most of them, intelligence expertise and either worked for Amdocs or other companies in Israel that specialize in wiretapping. Earlier this week, the Israeli embassy here in Washington denied any spying against or in the United States.
On June 5th, 1986, hi, my name is GDF, and you can probably tell by the direction that this video is going in that I'm not very advertiser-friendly. For that reason, I rely completely on my patrons.
Huh. My camera's froze. Give me a second. Huh. That's weird. What the hell? Get it back. Huh. Huh. bit bright. That's a bit better. Hmm. Huh. Huh. Thank you. What the hell? Stupid webcam. Aren't you solid? Fine, I'll take it off. Add source. Video capture device. Add source. Add source. Oh, for crying out loud. Hmm. Huh. Saw it.
Subscribers, and donations. The Washington Post published an article written by Charles Babcock titled, U.S. an Intelligence Target of the Israelis, Officials Say. From the article, quote, there is evidence that Israel has run intelligence operations in the United States for years, despite Israeli assertions that the Jonathan J. Pollard spy case was an isolated episode,
No, it
according
wasn't.
to current and former U.S. intelligence officials. Israeli intelligence services were more active than anyone but the KGB. John Davitt, longtime head of the Justice Department's Internal Security Section until his retirement in 1980, said in a recent telephone interview, end quote. A substantial New Yorker piece on Jonathan Pollard from 1999 by none other than Seymour Hersh bore the name Traitor. From the text of that article,
hang on, I'm going to see if shutting down the stream actually makes it work. I'll be back in a couple of seconds.